it gets responses.
Do you think it's funny?
No.
Then why would you do this?
It's just something that I like to put myself into that role and talk about.
I can only imagine what would have been going on in this house had I not been here. Am I wrong to think that?
No, you're not.
"35 predators, 7 levels. When Chris Hansen shows up, it's going to be pretty bad."
You ask, whoa, sir.
We'll start with some of the more well-known cases and slowly move into some of the most shocking and messed up incidents ever captured on the show.
Oh man, I wasn't doing anything.
Get his keys.
I wasn't doing anything.
Why don't you have a seat, and we'll start at the tip of the iceberg. Disclaimer. Level 1. Eric Pallison. Eric Pallison was just 19 when he drove to a house in Riverside, California in 2006, believing he was meeting a girl he had met online. Using the screen name Jazzman04, he had engaged in inappropriate online conversations with someone he thought he could take advantage of. But of course, he was actually walking right into a sting operation orchestrated by To Catch a Predator. But the day Eric showed up was particularly chaotic for the crew. 3 potential predators arrived almost simultaneously. One parked across the street, another on a side street, while Eric paced nervously outside the house. Any one of them could have walked in first, triggering the sting. But Eric was the one to do it. After hesitating, he finally walked up the driveway and entered, finding himself face to face with Chris Hansen. Definitely not what he expected. Eric barely had time to process what was happening before making a split-second decision that would define his segment. He bolted.
But no. Well, I'm sorry.
But unlike earlier stings where some men managed to escape, this time police were waiting. Detectives immediately sprang into action, arresting Eric as he fled the house. In a way, he got lucky. His segment barely lasted a minute on the broadcast show, just enough to see him enter, encounter Hansen, and run. Not much to leave a lasting mark on the show, but his post-show behavior changed that. Eric was convicted and required to register as an offender for life. According to Chris Hansen's podcast, while still on probation at age 22, Eric victimized an actual girl, proving that he had not changed his ways whatsoever. Today, Eric is notorious among fans of the show for aggressively flagging any video footage of his appearance on YouTube and other platforms. His relentless effort to scrub his digital footprint have ironically made him more notable than his brief segment ever did. Greg Carnos. When Greg Carnos showed up at the Riverside, California Sting House in 2006, he was already a registered offender, having previously been arrested for public indecency. He had just completed probation when he began having explicit chats online with someone who could get him in trouble. Greg arranged to meet the girl at her house, unaware the entire operation was part of Dateline NBC's To Catch a Predator series. On the day of the meeting, surveillance footage captured Carnos hesitating outside the house, peeking around nervously before deciding to enter. When Greg walked in, instead of finding a teenager alone, he encountered Chris Hansen. The confrontation started like many others on the show, with Hansen questioning Greg about his intentions before Hansen began reviewing the explicit chat logs, asking Greg to explain himself.
You came here to meet a 13-year-old girl.
No.
In your chat log,
You know, that's all just make-believe. I didn't for a second believe it was 13-year-old.
13 female Riverside.
From there, the tension escalated quickly. Unlike most predators who sat through their humiliating interviews, Greg had other plans. The moment Hansen mentioned the phrase, "Do you like older guys?" from the chat logs, Greg bolted.
You ask, whoa, sir.
He suddenly took off, running from the house, catching Hansen and the crew off guard. Somehow, they didn't expect he would try. The escape attempt was futile, of course. Outside, Riverside County Sheriff's deputies were waiting. They immediately apprehended Greg as he fled the property. He became one of 50 men arrested during the 3-day sting operation in Southern California. But Greg's case stood out among the dozens arrested. His status as a repeat offender combined with his dramatic attempt to flee made his segment particularly disturbing. His prior history and willingness to reoffend despite previous consequences suggest that this would not be the last time he was caught. Michael Warriker. In 2006, 29-year-old Michael Warriker became the target of the show's Long Beach, California sting operation.
Now, Warriker is at the door,
Hi, how you doing?
being met by a youngish-looking 18-year-old decoy playing the girl who's supposed to be home alone.
His involvement was immediately troubling from the start. Michael used the screen name Can I Rap You while chatting with girls online. During their online conversations, Michael wasted no time making his disturbing intentions clear. Within just 2 minutes of beginning their chat, he asked the decoy if she had a fetish related to his name.
It gets responses.
Do you think it's funny?
No.
Then why would you do this?
It's just something that I like to put myself into that role and talk about.
When she responded that his question was creepy, he quickly backpedaled, claiming it was just a rough fantasy. But he never seemed to slow down or change course, continuing to push for them to hook up. When Michael arrived at the sting house, he was greeted by the decoy. His demeanor remained eerily calm when Chris Hansen emerged for the confrontation, knowing exactly what was going on. He claimed to have always known that this was a setup, yet he came anyway. Throughout the interview, he maintained this strange position while acknowledging he knew the decoy. He didn't even try to pretend he didn't know how young she was, despite his horrific claims to her. By the time the interview was over, Long Beach police were already positioned outside. Michael was immediately arrested and charged with attempting a lewd act upon a person under 14, a felony in California punishable by up to 4 years in prison. To avoid harsher punishment, Michael pleaded no contest to the felony charge. He served 120 days in jail, received 5 years probation, and was required to register as an offender for life. Level 2. David Hilbish. When David Hilbish pulled into the driveway of what he thought was his online chatmate's home in Fortson, Georgia, he knew what he was there for. The 38-year-old tunnel builder had been chatting online with Tracy, using the screen name Tunnels12000 and lying about his age, claiming to be 27, not 38.
Emily, wave him in. Here he comes. Good job. Good job. We got him coming.
Online, using the screen name Tunnels12000, he tells the decoy named Tracy in excess this isn't his first time meeting a teen on the internet.
David initially attempted to present himself as a gentleman, but quickly shifted to explicit content. He told the decoy he wanted to perform indecent acts on her, instructing that all she needed to say was 3 words: "Go down, David." What made the case particularly alarming was David's admission in the chat that this wasn't his first attempt to meet a girl. "I did it before and I came real close to getting caught," he typed to the decoy. He claimed they stayed out all night and fell asleep in my truck, but insisted he didn't do it with her.
"I did it with a 15-year-old before, and I came real close to getting caught. I didn't have sex with her, everything but." He later says he was questioned by detectives, but never charged. Now, he wants to have sex with Tracy.
When confronted by Chris Hansen, David's story quickly unraveled. He initially claimed ignorance about Tracy's age, saying he had no idea how old she was.
And so you were chatting with a girl named Tracy.
Right.
How old is Tracy?
I don't have no idea.
The problem for you, David, is that I have the chat right here.
But when Hansen produced the chat logs showing he knew she was 14, David's defense crumbled. He also denied having been with an underage girl before, directly contradicting his own chat messages. When confronted with this inconsistency, David admitted to the previous incident, but claimed police had questioned him and released him without charges. David became one of 20 men caught during the 4.5-day Fortson, Georgia sting operation. Like the others exposed on the show, he was arrested, prosecuted, and ultimately sentenced for his actions. Jim Rausch. Jim Rausch was a 59-year-old web designer who ironically worked for the Criminal Justice Program at the University of Cincinnati. His colleagues described him as arrogant and pompous, constantly trying to assert himself as the smartest person in the room. So maybe it came as some kind of comfort when in April 2007, he stumbled into the crosshairs of To Catch a Predator.
She told me she was 13, but and I was very, very, very. I don't do that.
Like all the predators, Jim contacted what he believed was a girl named Cheyenne online. Within minutes of their first conversation, he sent an explicit photo and asked if she wanted to perform explicit acts. For nearly 2 weeks, he groomed the decoy. Despite repeatedly acknowledging her age, Jim continued sending inappropriate messages and photos, some taken in his office. When the decoy mentioned being home alone, Jim arranged to meet her, even while expressing fear that it could ruin his life.
I did not do anything to this, whatever this person is, whoever it is.
So you guys did talk about facts in your conversations?
I don't know that.
On the night of April 13th, he consumed multiple alcoholic drinks before driving to the meeting location. Drunk and disoriented, he made several bizarre, borderline unhinged calls to the decoy while lost. When he finally arrived at the Highland Heights, Kentucky home, police immediately arrested him. Given how totally wasted he was, it took very little effort on the part of the police. What followed was an hours-long interrogation where detectives methodically dismantled every aspect of his story. Jim alternating between claiming he didn't really want to meet her and that he was enticed into showing up. He attempted to befriend the officers, making jokes and going off topic while simultaneously trying to position himself as someone who cares about other people, using his job in criminal justice as an excuse. But throughout the interrogation, he divulged his entire process while attempting to frame himself as a victim of circumstance, claiming the decoy must have really needed him there, shifting blame to the very system he worked for. It was no good. He was swiftly sentenced for his crimes. Michael Popovich. When To Catch a Predator ended, Chris Hansen moved on to a new show with the same premise titled Hansen vs. Predator. Michael Popovich, a 55-year-old retired Marine Corps lieutenant colonel, somehow became one of the most notorious figures to be featured on the show, despite never actually appearing on camera. In August 2015, Michael first made contact with Bailey, supposedly a girl, through a social media platform called Wire Club. What he didn't know was that Bailey was actually an adult decoy working with Hansen's production team and the Fairfield Police Department in Connecticut. Over the next 3 months, Michael engaged in increasingly explicit conversations with the decoy, sending explicit photos and videos of himself, describing in graphic detail the indecent acts he wanted to perform on the supposed decoy, and outlining what he wanted Bailey to do to him. Michael documented his own crimes extensively through texts, pictures, video calls, and recorded messages. He gave them more evidence than maybe any other predator. While most predators in the series were caught when they showed up at the Sting House, Michael never made the trip to Connecticut. But this decision didn't save him. The evidence he'd provided was overwhelming. He had to be taken care of. Virginia Beach police obtained a search warrant for his home after receiving the evidence from Connecticut authorities. On November 12, 2015, Michael was arrested at Norfolk International Airport. During questioning, he admitted to knowing Bailey and her alleged age, confessed to sending inappropriate links to her, and acknowledged chatting with others just like Bailey online. He knew that he had left too strong a paper trail to even try to deny it. The Virginia justice system showed no mercy. While other predators from the same operation received sentences under 4 years, Virginia's stricter laws regarding crimes resulted in Michael receiving a 20-year sentence, with 10 years suspended. To this day, this is still one of the longest sentences given to any predator caught through Hansen's investigations. Level 3. Stephen Buchanan. Stephen Buchanan, a 27-year-old former soldier and Connecticut National Guard member, arrived at a Fairfield house believing he would meet a girl. At the time, he was on the list to become a Stratford police officer. Now, he approached the decoy house with a tense, unsettling demeanor. He spoke in clipped, matter-of-fact tones as he pursued what he believed was a chance to meet. When confronted by Hansen, Buchanan claimed he was just going to take her out and show her around. He made up a story about his cousin being assaulted in a similar situation, suggesting he was there to protect the girl from predators.
And you decided, because you're former military and still in the National Guard, right?
Yes.
That you were going to come over and show this 13-year-old girl around so she'd be safe.
Yes.
The explicitly charged chat logs quickly proved he was lying. He was the predator. But then officers searched Buchanan's car. Inside, they discovered a loaded gun, a roll of duct tape, and a knife in a bag, suggesting that his intentions were far, far darker than he had suggested. Not long after his initial arrest, Buchanan was caught in a second sting operation. The latter encounter unfolded with the same intensive clinical precision as the first. Every step he took, every hesitant explanation only deepened the evidence against him. Buchanan reappeared, trapped in this grim cycle of predatory behavior. Buchanan eventually pleaded guilty to charges in connection with the original sting operation and faced up to 3 years in prison. Richard Burnham. Richard Burnham, a 42-year-old former fire department captain, went a little further than most predators on the show. He had crafted an elaborate plan to prey on users using not one, but 2 fake online personas. In what has to be one of the show's most calculating cases, Richard posed as Rick, a 21-year-old college student using the same name, Uncon Blue and White, to initiate contact with what he believed was a virgin girl. After gaining the decoy's trust, Richard's Rick character suddenly claimed illness, introducing his friend Steve, a 37-year-old photographer using the screen name Steve Takes Pics, who could take his place. Of course, in reality, Richard was playing both characters, masterminding a bait-and-switch scheme to manipulate the girl into indecent acts with his older persona. It was an unusually complex plan for the show's usual targets. When he switched to Steve, Richard expressed desires to take her virginity with disturbing disregard for consequences, telling her, "If I get you preg, I get you preg." In what may actually be one of the most disturbing parts of any sting ever conducted, his depravity escalated when he called the decoy while allegedly touching himself, getting aroused by her voice. After nearly a month of grooming, Richard arrived at what he thought was the girl's house, expecting to meet the teen he'd manipulated through his dual identity scheme. Instead, he walked into a sting operation where he met Casey Morrow, the 19-year-old decoy posing as the teen, and Chris Hansen. It was a textbook sting.
So there are layers of lies here. Yeah. All intended, it would appear, to set up a sexual liaison with a 14-year-old girl. Right? Yes.
Richard was arrested immediately. He served months in jail and received lifetime registration as an offender. His calculated plan to use one fake identity to vouch for another showcased a particularly disturbing level of premeditation that ultimately led to his downfall. A crazy, complicated scheme rarely seen on the show. And if you want to see more videos about crazy, disturbing incidents like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Jeff Sokol. Jeff Sokol, a 44-year-old from Boston, had spent weeks grooming Bailey, a supposedly 13-year-old girl. He engaged in explicit conversations inquiring about her pubic hair and stating his intentions to be intimate with her. Jeff's arrogance was clear in his bizarre plan to make his behavior legal through a marriage contract he drafted.
In a text that will turn your stomach, Sokol talks about a marriage contract and even suggests they elope. The only thing that can prevent me from getting arrested is if we got married, LOL.
He believed this document would somehow legitimize doing acts with someone significantly younger and make it impossible for him to be arrested. He would soon be proven wrong. On October 3, 2015, he drove 2.5 hours to Fairfield, Connecticut, where Bailey said her mother was away on business. He arrived at the decoy house with a pizza. When the decoy answered, Jeff tried to hug her but was rejected.
That's a long drive.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'm really nervous.
Oh, you gonna give me a hug?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
They chatted briefly about this whole marriage contract idea he had while Jeff casually took medication he claimed was for his stomach. When Chris Hansen walked in, Jeff immediately mistook him for the girl's father. What followed became an infamous encounter. Jeff continued eating pizza throughout the interview as though nothing was going on.
Who are you? To come here.
Are you her dad?
To meet a young girl.
Are you her dad?
I will get to that in a minute. Go ahead, have a bite.
Instead of showing remorse, Jeff displayed remarkable narcissism, laughing off Hansen's questions at every turn. He genuinely believed his marriage contract would protect him from legal consequences. Police arrested Jeff as he left. After his conviction and prison sentence, his narcissism persisted as he petitioned to change his name due to the infamy from his appearance. The judge denied his request, insisting the public should know exactly who he was and what he had done. Marie Swollen. Marie Swollen, like all predators, lived a double life. By day, a respected cancer research doctor. By night, tall, dreamy Doc, a man who chatted online with someone he believed was 13 years old.
This man is 48 years old, married, and a prominent San Francisco physician. It's hard to believe that someone of his stature would show up to meet a girl who said she was 13.
Despite his impressive status in medical circles, Maurice engaged in increasingly inappropriate conversation, eventually agreeing to meet the supposed teen at the Sting House. Maurice had lied about everything, his marriage, even his age, claiming to be 29 despite his balding hair and mature appearance betraying all of his lies. But the confidence of his professional life seemed to carry over as he walked into the trap, pouring himself a margarita while waiting for the girl to change into her swimsuit for a promised hot tub encounter. Then, it all collapsed. His clumsiness led him to spill the drink, making a mess. In his attempt to find a towel to clean it, he spotted the camera crew and instantly made an effort to flee the scene before he could be captured.
Do you have a towel?
As the doctor looks for a towel, he spots Dateline's camera crew.
I gotta take off. Sir, I need to talk to you for a minute.
His escape lasted seconds. Outside, police were waiting for this exact situation. In a moment of pure frustration, Maurice slammed his sunglasses to the ground as officers closed in. He was done. During questioning, Maurice's strategy shifted erratically as he insisted he had never done anything wrong in his life, as if his clean record would somehow erase the evidence they had on camera. He requested an attorney but bizarrely continued talking anyway, even though he was just incriminating himself more and more. The final humiliation came when officers dialed his wife, forcing Maurice to ask her for bail money, $30,000. The fallout destroyed everything. His career vanished, legal proceedings dragged on, the shame followed him everywhere. After his arrest, Maurice spiraled into depression. Years later, investigator Eric Neal discovered the ultimate conclusion of Maurice's story. He had committed final escape from the consequences of his actions. Level 4. Kevin Westerbeck. In 2006, Kevin Westerbeck showed up at the Decoy House in Greenville, Ohio. He was 47 years old, a budget analyst for the U.S. military at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But he wasn't just any predator. He was already headed to prison. Before his appearance, Kevin had been arrested in Fairborn for trying to meet a girl. He'd literally pleaded guilty to that crime just hours before heading to the Greenville Sting House, showing absolutely no concern about the situation. With sentencing scheduled 4 days later and an 11-month prison term looming, Kevin couldn't resist one for the road.
We knew that he was to be in court 4 days later, to go before a judge and to be sentenced.
Standing under 5 feet tall, Kevin's physical stature made him instantly recognizable to authorities, but it was his behavior that truly horrified viewers. When the decoy told him she needed to finish getting changed, his immediate response was that he would be happy to watch her.
I gotta finish getting changed, okay?
Huh?
I gotta finish getting changed, okay?
Well, I'll watch it.
During his conversation with Chris Hansen, Kevin initially denied his intentions before finally admitting, "I'm stupid, I'm weak."
I'm stupid, I'm weak,
That's when Hansen revealed that they knew all about Kevin's pending court appearance and prison sentence.
Now, Kevin, you've had some contact with the law before. You were accused of doing the very same thing that you're out doing tonight.
When asked why he's in the house so close to going to prison for the same thing, Kevin just offered up a very weak response: stupidity.
What then are you doing in this house?
Stupidity, because I didn't expect this.
After his appearance on the show, Kevin was sentenced to an additional 9 months in prison for his second offense. The court ultimately classified him as a predator rather than merely an oriented offender. What makes Kevin particularly hated among viewers isn't just his actions, but the brazen timing. The fact that he couldn't even wait 4 days before his prison sentence to attempt another crime made him the most hated predator in the history of the show. Rabbi David Kay. Rabbi David Kay was a respected religious leader in Maryland. At 53, he served as vice president of Panem, the Institute for Jewish Leaders and Values, presenting himself as a wholesome community figure while secretly searching for inappropriate encounters online. In August 2005, using the username RedBD, David began chatting with someone he believed was a 13-year-old boy. Soon enough, the conversations quickly turned explicit, with David soliciting specific acts and arranging a meeting. Of course, he was walking right into the decoy. David drove from Maryland to a sting house in Herndon, Virginia, expecting to meet the teen for indecent acts. Instead, he found host Chris Hansen waiting with his crew. When confronted, David admitted to being there for not something good. He knew it was coming.
What are you doing?
Not something good.
They had the transcripts confirming everything he had said.
But I also want to go over some of this chat log with you.
But then, Chris revealed his identity, and all hell broke loose. Once the cameras were revealed, he leapt to his feet, demanding they stop filming. It didn't work.
I am Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on computer predators.
After the sting, David attempted to sue Dateline and left threatening messages for the crew, but nothing stopped the evidence from reaching authorities. In September 2006, he was convicted of enticement and traveling across state lines to engage in illegal misconduct. But, as with many cases on the show, prosecutors later revealed this wasn't isolated behavior. Sealed affidavits described prior incidents, including allegations dating back to a 1974 youth camp. He was a predator in plain sight. The court sentenced David to 78 months in prison and 10 years of supervised release. He was required to register as an offender and barred from unsupervised contact with the youth. Years later, when attempting to worship at a Dot Shalom Reconstructionist congregation, the board banned him despite his claims of repentance, citing safety concerns. His life was ruined because of his own actions. Anthony Palumbo. In 2007, 46-year-old Anthony Palumbo became one of the most notorious predators caught on To Catch a Predator during their Ocean County, New Jersey sting operation. Unlike most visitors to the undercover house who expected to meet young girls, Anthony had been chatting online with a decoy posing as a 14-year-old boy. Using the screen name Hi Buddy Was Up in an AOL gay chat room, Anthony's conversations quickly turned explicit. He told the decoy he was horny and wanted to be top. When discussing protection, he asked if they could do it raw, and then specifically clarified that he meant no rubber, making his intentions very, very clear. Anthony arrived at the sting house with beer in hand, repeatedly asking the decoy to put it in the refrigerator, seemingly more concerned about properly storing alcohol than the illegal nature of what he was about to do. When the decoy, played by an 18-year-old actor, invited him inside, Anthony appeared visibly nervous but proceeded anyway.
Come on in. Awesome.
His distinctive speech pattern and mannerisms made him instantly memorable to viewers. When confronted by host Chris Hansen, Anthony immediately recognized the situation, admitting, "I know I did a stupid thing." But acknowledging it didn't stop him from trying to get out of the mess he had created.
I thought it was like I wanted to hang out with someone, like a friend,
Like, I thought he was like 18, something like that. It wasn't, I'm not gay or anything.
When he attempted to flee, Anthony was quickly apprehended by waiting police officers outside the house. The consequences were severe: lifetime parole supervision and permanent registration as an offender. The fan community quickly nicknamed him Gay Romano for his resemblance to comedian Ray Romano, cementing his place among the most recognized predators in the show's history. Not for good reasons, of course. Chris Urban. Chris Urban, a 26-year-old from Rancho, California, became one of a whopping 35 men caught during the Riverside sting operation in 2006. Chris had engaged in online chats with someone he believed was a girl named Kelly. When Chris arrived at the sting house, he appeared visibly jittery and, in his words, jazzed up. He immediately went to wash his hands, displaying nervous energy that Chris Hansen later noted seemed consistent with someone under the influence.
He's, shaky. He looks like he's on some kind of a drug.
That obviously was, sadly, very accurate. When police later investigated his car, they found methamphetamine. As Chris dried his hands, Hansen approached and handed him a paper towel. This was the moment Chris realized what was happening. When Hansen began questioning him, Chris fumbled for explanations, claiming he had initially been tempted but had changed his mind during the drive over, yet somehow he still arrived. He justified it, claiming that he came here to tell her that he couldn't do it, that it was going against his conscience.
I can't really do this. I don't feel right in my conscience. Like, I'm a conscience type person.
But Hansen pressed further. When asked if he had brought condoms as requested by the decoy, Chris reached into his pocket and instead produced a bottle of 151 proof rum, claiming it was really watered down. Despite Chris's desperate and increasingly ridiculous attempts to talk his way out of the situation, the evidence was damning. The chat logs, the alcohol he brought, and the methamphetamine discovered in his vehicle all contradicted his story of having a last-minute change of heart. He was going through with it, no question. Chris was subsequently arrested by waiting police officers, joining the long list of predators caught by Hansen's notorious sting operations. Marvin Lackhan. Marvin Lackhan, known online as Crazy Trini85, spent just 2 hours chatting with Cindy, a decoy posing as the girl, before arranging to meet her. That made him one of the fastest predators ever to fall into the decoy's trap.
Well, before I can get past her and open the door, he has hot-footed it across the living room and has his hand on the door. So I open the door, he's there, he's stunned, I'm stunned.
Marvin had sent explicit pictures almost instantly, and upon learning Cindy was a virgin, began detailing graphic acts he wanted to perform. His messages escalated to disturbing requests involving a cat, Cool Whip, and inappropriate activities. A bizarre scenario that horrified viewers. The decoy suggested that Marvin enter the house naked, a proposition he eagerly accepted without hesitation.
I'm getting ready. Where's my cat?
Where are you?
Wait, just take a seat. Have a cookie. I made them because they'll go with the Cool Whip. It was kind of a little surprise.
When he arrived at the sting house, Marvin stripped completely, expecting to find the teen alone. Instead, he encountered Chris Hansen, asking him to wrap a towel around himself. Visibly uncomfortable with the entire situation, Marvin claimed he was making a mistake when Hansen questioned his intentions. But Hansen knew everything. When confronted about the cat and Cool Whip, Marvin stammered, "I was just messing around with that. I wasn't serious." Hansen pushed further, pointing out that if he wasn't there, something truly horrific would have happened in the house. Something Marvin actually agrees with.
I can only imagine what would have been going on in this house had I not been here. Am I wrong to think that?
No, you're not.
After the interview, Marvin was arrested, but by 2013, he had become a wanted fugitive in Florida, evading justice despite his on-camera confession. When he was finally caught, he was deported to his native home of Trinidad and Tobago. Level 5. Glenn Mitchell. In 2006, Glenn Mitchell, a 53-year-old man from Carmel, Indiana, became the latest target of the show. But unlike the other potential predators caught in the Greenville, Ohio sting, Glenn never actually made it to the house.
There is one potential predator, however, who never makes it to the house. He's 52-year-old Glenn Mitchell.
Glenn had been chatting online with someone named Vance, who was the decoy posing as a boy. Within just 5 minutes of their conversation, Glenn asked to meet the teenager. During their exchanges, he made disturbing admissions about his past, including that he had previously had relations with other boys Vance's age, showing absolutely no shame about his actions.
He admitted on the phone with me that he'd already had sex with a 15-year-old boy. He said that he really enjoyed younger men in general.
The chat grew increasingly concerned when Glenn told the decoy he intended to repeatedly have relations with him and treat him as his main woman.
He wants to engage in sex repeatedly. He wants to treat the boy like his main woman.
He was quickly given directions to the Sting house in Ohio. Glenn began the 2-hour drive from Indiana to Ohio, but became lost and couldn't locate the house. Instead of continuing his search, he just turned around and headed back to Indiana, but justice would be served whether he turned up or not. State police arrested Glenn on Interstate 465 near Pendleton Pike as he returned home. He was held in Marion County Jail, where authorities worked to extradite him to Ohio to face felony charges for attempting to have unlawful conduct. He was one of 18 men who appeared in Darke County courtroom following the weekend sting operation that targeted predators from Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. He did not get away with his crimes. James Rutherford. James Rutherford walked into the Sting house looking for a girl he chatted with online named Danica. As a 26-year-old 6th grade teacher at St. Margaret of York Catholic School in Loveland, Ohio, James was in a position of trust. He taught students the same age as the decoy he'd driven 2 hours to meet. When Chris Hansen emerged, James immediately claimed he'd expected it to be a setup.
I had a feeling this was what was going on, honestly.
You had a feeling what was going on?
That this was some sort of setup.
His demeanor shifted from confident to defensive as he sat down for questioning. He offered a familiar excuse. He was going through a divorce and simply wanted to get out of the house.
I was bored. I'm going through a divorce. I just wanted to get out of the house.
Despite explicit chat logs, he insisted nothing was planned with Danica. He claimed that he never wanted to come to the house, telling himself that she's a kid, I am a teacher. Yet he kept driving. Then he was confronted with the transcripts. James' chat history revealed questions about the girl's underwear and whether she was, while telling her he was aroused himself.
You were on your webcam, showing off in front of this 13-year-old girl. And the conversation you had with this girl
was bad, I know.
His nervous body language betrayed his words. He always intended this. Most disturbing of all was his admission of having similar online conversations with others.
Have you ever gone to visit somebody who's underage before?
No.
Have you ever chatted with somebody who's underage before?
I have.
This man, trusted to educate 6th graders, spent his private time seeking some sort of gratification from victims of the same age. He justified it all as being nothing more than a fantasy, as if that would make it any less creepy.
Look, that was like fantasy. That was like fantasy.
Know, but when Hansen confirmed he was on national television, James put his head in his hands, giving in to his fate. This wasn't just public humiliation. It was the end of his career and freedom. After initially fighting the charges, he eventually pleaded guilty, receiving 45 days in jail, 3 years probation, and 10 years on the offender registry. Clifford Wallach. Clifford Wallach was more cautious than many of the other predators featured on the show. Caught up in the Fort Myers, Florida investigation, he had been posing as Jason, cautiously holding back in his online chats, with a decoy posing as a 14-year-old boy. But while he avoided explicit details in writing, Clifford revealed his true intentions during a phone call with the decoy, a conversation secretly recorded by Florida law enforcement that would later prove damning. However, none of this is why Clifford became quite so notorious for fans of the show. No, the truly shocking element wasn't that he showed up at the Sting house. It was that he brought his 5-year-old son along.
And up the driveway.
And I hear Frag saying,
"Oh no, he brought his son with him. He brought his son with him. He's got his child with him."
When Chris Hansen revealed himself, he decided to tell him everything up front, purely to try and defuse any dangerous situation that could unfold. Obviously, Clifford left the scene immediately, claiming he would never do this again. But outside, as police moved in, cameras captured his desperation as he started begging them to give him his son.
"You come here. Let go of the child."
As gently as the female officer scooped him up, he still had to see his father get arrested.
"Please give me my son, please."
It had never happened before in the show's history and became an instant defining moment. During interrogation, Clifford attempted to shift blame onto his wife, claiming her refusal to be intimate drove him to seek out the decoy. It was a bold and unsuccessful strategy, and it didn't save him from receiving one of the harshest penalties in the show's history. 5 years in prison, followed by a decade of probation. But somehow, what happened after the show was significantly worse.
During his interview with police, he suggested that it was the lack of intimacy in his marriage that drove him to do this.
When the Department of Family Services ruled Clifford couldn't live with his offspring, his wife faced an impossible choice: stay with her husband or her son. Shockingly, she chose Clifford, sending their son to live with relatives. To this day, fans of the show express particular disgust over this case more than any other. On Reddit, viewers know that Clifford is frequently discussed specifically because he brought his offspring, with one commenter stating his wife is as terrible as he is for choosing her offender husband over her son. After prison, Clifford reunited with his wife, having another son together and moving into a gated Palm Beach County community worth up to $1 million, inherited from his parents. They later divorced and he established a construction business, apparently leaving his criminal past behind. Or so he claims. Walter Babst. Walter Edward Babst, a 43-year-old high school teacher, entered an online chat room and began conversing with Beth, who clearly identified herself as 12 years old. Within minutes, Walter's conversation turned for the worst. He told the girl he wanted to get her naked and do inappropriate acts with her. Already, the team had enough to get him. The chat quickly spiraled into disturbing territory. Walter discussed not wanting to use condoms, but his most revolting moment was his admission that he tastes his own reproductive fluid all the time, comparing the flavor to uncooked pancake batter. Walter had a particular fixation on the girl wearing a plaid skirt for their meeting. This detail becomes especially creepy when you remember that he's a high school teacher surrounded by young girls in similar kinds of clothing every day. When Walter arrived at the Sting house, he was dressed in what some described as cool dad style. The moment he spotted Chris Hansen, his demeanor changed instantly.
I'm under arrest.
He knew what this was and what he did. Suddenly, he told the team,
"I need you to just arrest me and take me to jail and execute."
Seemingly aware his life was imploding. When Hansen asked him why he came, Walter replied bluntly, "Because I'm a sick son of a..." The confrontation continued with Hansen reading portions of the explicit chat log. When questioned about his occupation, Walter reluctantly admitted that he taught youth for a living. It was one of the most disturbing reveals in the show's history. But the aftermath proved equally shocking. After being arrested and posting bail, Walter actually returned to his classroom. It took 6 days before the school finally suspended him without pay. Students expressed shock, though some hinted they weren't entirely surprised by the revelation. It makes you wonder what he must have done at his workplace to earn that kind of reaction. Level 6. Michael Siebert. Michael Siebert earned his infamous place in the show's history by becoming one of the few men to be caught twice by Chris Hansen and the team. In 2006, at age 26, Michael walked into a Riverside, California Sting house after having explicit online conversations with someone he believed was a 13-year-old girl. He'd even sent pictures of his genitals to the decoy. When confronted by Hansen, his immediate nonchalant response was simply, oops.
Then why did you send pictures of yourself like this to her?
Oops.
Oops.
He didn't seem to be particularly bothered by the situation beyond that. After being caught, Siebert promised he would never do it again.
I will never do it again. Promise.
Never do it again.
Yep.
That promise didn't last long, even after his immediate arrest. Just 8 months later, while still facing charges from his first offense, Michael appeared at another sting house in Long Beach, California. Incredibly, he'd been chatting online with what he thought was another 13-year-old girl using the exact same screen name. He'd even had to delay their meeting because he had a court date related to his first offense the day before. It was an audacious, crazy situation. When Hansen recognized him at the second sting, Michael's response was, once again, oops.
You know, you look familiar to me.
Oops.
Do you remember who I am?
Can't guess so.
But this time, he didn't try to offer any remorse. He instead tried to justify his behavior by claiming the decoy kept hiring me back.
She told you she was 13.
Yeah, and I told her to go away. And she keeps eyeing me back.
Showing zero understanding of his actions or responsibility. Obviously, this guy was pretty pathetic. All the fans agreed too. But behind his seemingly pathetic demeanor lies a more disturbing history. Michael had previously served a year in jail for a dangerous assault with a bat. He was an exceptionally violent man. After his appearance on the show, he pleaded guilty to attempted lewd acts and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Despite claiming to understand what I did wrong after his first catch, Michael's quick return to the same behavior just shows that he has a complete lack of remorse or rehabilitation, making him one of the most disturbing repeat offenders in the show's history. His history of violence just raises the question of what exactly could have happened if he hadn't been caught. Dustin McFetridge. Dustin McFetridge was 26 when he appeared on the Bowling Green, Kentucky investigation. Immediately noticeable for his cerebral palsy, he walked with a cane and struggled to even enter the sting house. Investigators admitted feeling sympathy watching his struggle, until they remembered why he was there.
When you first look at him and you see him and you could say that I felt a little bit sorry for him. And then you remember why we're here.
Behind Dustin's disability lurked a horrifyingly calculated manipulation. Previously, he escaped charges after chatting with a 14-year-old when her mother's boyfriend, a police officer, discovered the conversations. That incident taught Dustin that he could use his condition to avoid consequences. On this day, Dustin drove 5 hours across state lines to meet Laura, whom he believed was 13. His chat logs revealed horrifying intentions. He wanted to shave her, get her drunk, and have rough acts with her. He asked her to wear panties for days before sending them to him.
Send me a pair of your panties. Pick a pair you want me to have and wear them for 2 or 3 days straight.
For reals?
Yeah.
Most disturbingly of all was his request for a threesome with Laura's supposed 8-year-old sister. He arrived at the house carrying an electric razor, KY jelly lubricant, and a digital camera.
His car is searched.
Braun electric razor, KY, lubricant, and a digital camera.
But the girl wasn't engaging with him the way he wanted. That's when Chris Hansen showed up. Suddenly, Dustin's story changed. He immediately shifted blame to the totally fake girl, claiming she led him on.
She was wanting me to come up here and see her so bad, and I didn't want to disappoint her.
After his arrest, Dustin pulled every pity string, highlighting his disability, weight, and bullying experiences to the interrogating officer. His effort failed spectacularly. The officer responded by confronting him with the explicit chat logs.
How many of these chats do I have to read out loud for you to say the truth of what you were doing?
There was no sympathy here. Dustin received 5 years for traveling across state lines to meet a decoy who was allegedly a minor, plus 8 more for illegal video possession found during the investigation, ultimately serving 10 years. While in prison, Dustin wrote his judge requesting early release or alternatively a walk-in jacuzzi for his cell. Both requests were denied. He wasn't special, just another predator. Level 7. Thomas Bodner. In 2006, Thomas Bodner walked into the trap in Riverside, California, believing he was meeting a boy after sending nude photos and professing his love online. But the moment he stepped through the doorway, he called out for him, then spotted Chris Hansen. Naturally, he bolted. What viewers didn't immediately know was that Thomas wasn't just another first-time offender. His predatory history stretched back decades. In Salem, Oregon, a single mother once trusted him as a positive male role model through a Big Brother program. Thomas betrayed this trust in the worst way imaginable, systematically taking advantage of all three, 2 boys and 1 girl. This horrific abuse resulted in a 10-year prison sentence, but incarceration didn't stop him. By 1999, Thomas had been arrested again for having indecent acts with a boy in another incident. When Dateline's team investigated Thompson's background, they located one of his previous victims. Desiree Holcomb, who had been just 9 years old when Thomas took advantage of her, was stunned to learn he was still doing it to others to this day.
I would wake up out of a dead sleep to him French kissing me and touching my privates.
As Thomas fled the Sting house, police tackled him to the ground. With his head bleeding from the impact, he was quickly booked and eventually sentenced to 15 years in prison. But the story doesn't end there. Just 3 years after his release in 2020, Thomas was caught with inappropriate material facing California's 3 strikes law. He was indefinitely committed to Colina State Hospital, where he remains today. Todd Spikes. In December 2006, Todd Monroe Spikes, a former Alabama police officer, became one of the most chilling catches in Flagler Beach, Florida. At 41, Todd had spent weeks chatting online with Lindsay, believing she was a girl he could take advantage of. But here's where he was different from the other predators. Todd didn't just discuss inappropriate acts. He typed in all caps about explicit acts he wanted to perform on the decoy. He even suggested becoming her mother's boyfriend to facilitate this ongoing abuse and talked about letting strangers have their way with her while he watched. His obsessions were depraved and disturbing. On the night of the sting, when Todd failed to show at the scheduled time, the Dateline crew and police thought he'd backed out of the whole thing. Operations were shutting down when he called the decoy at 1 a.m. saying he was on his way. But police intercepted him before he reached the house. What they found in his SUV shocked even veteran officers. Multiple loaded weapons, a shotgun, an assault rifle, and multiple loaded handguns.
You have a 38 Smith & Wesson Special there, a Glock 40, and a 45 caliber 6-hour. You have a 12-gauge shotgun back there.
More disturbing were the items suggesting plans beyond the initial encounter. A chainsaw, tarp, ropes, and a boat anchor. Essentially, a body disposal kit, as well as his badge. He was going to intimidate, kidnap, and likely kill this young girl. Todd remained silent during questioning. He fought the charges for 3 years before pleading no contest in March 2010. Despite the arsenal and apparent kit, Todd somehow received no prison time. He got just 10 years of offender probation with possible early release after 5 years. He was required to register as an offender for life, and in 2012, he violated his parole and was arrested again. The light sentence raised a lot of questions, considering the evidence suggested Tom hadn't come for a meeting, but potentially for a kidnapping and eventual murder. And if you're still in the mood for more disturbing content, why not check out this video on the most disturbing Japanese movies?